They say every house hides a secret, but what if that secret lives right above your head? This is not just a story, it's a nightmare that began in the attic. It was close to midnight when I first heard the sound. At first it was faint, a soft scratching like tiny nails dragging across wood. I froze in my bed, trying to convince myself it was nothing more than rats crawling in the attic. But the longer I listened, the more I realized these noises were heavier, slower, deliberate. It sounded like something dragging itself across the floor above my head, stopping, then starting again as if it wanted me to notice. The air in my room felt colder with each passing second, and I could feel the hair on my arms stand on end. I pulled the blanket tighter around me, my heart thumping so hard it drowned out everything else for a moment. The house was old, the kind of place where wooden beams creaked at the slightest movement. Yet this sound was different. This was not the innocent scampering of animals. There was weight behind it, like boots sliding across the attic floor, like someone trying to move furniture slowly in the dead of night. My breath grew shallow as the silence stretched, only to be broken again by that scraping noise that felt far too human. I tried to gather courage and told myself it was only my imagination. Maybe the wind outside had pushed something against the ceiling. Maybe the house was settling like old houses do. But deep down, a part of me knew better. This was no ordinary noise. There was intent in it, as though something was waiting above me, hidden in the dark attic, making just enough sound to remind me that I was not alone. I could not bring myself to move. I just lay there staring at the ceiling, wondering if whatever was up there was staring back at me through the floorboards. The attic door was one part of the house we never touched. It had always been locked for as long as I could remember. My parents never spoke about it, and if I asked, they would quickly change the subject or simply say there was nothing up there worth seeing. With time, I learned not to ask questions, but a quiet unease settled in my mind every time I passed that door at the top of the stairs. It carried a kind of weight, like a secret pressing against the walls of the house waiting to be discovered. One night, as I made my way upstairs in the dark, I noticed something that froze me in place. The attic door was not closed the way it always was. It stood slightly open, just wide enough to show a thin line of darkness behind it. My chest tightened and I felt the air grow heavy. I reached for the banister, needing to steady myself, when a small cascade of dust fell from the ceiling above. It drifted slowly in the dim light as if something had just shifted inside the attic, disturbing years of silence. My mouth went dry and every instinct in me screamed to walk away, but I could not move. The silence of the hallway wrapped around me, broken only by the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears. I stared at that narrow gap, expecting at any moment to see a hand push the door wider, or an eye staring back at me through the darkness. For the first time, I realized that maybe the door had not always been locked to keep us out. Maybe it had been locked to keep something inside. That thought settled deep in my chest like ice, and I felt that if I stepped even an inch closer, I might never step back again. I do not remember the moment I convinced myself to step inside the attic. My hand shook as I pushed the door wider, and the hinges groaned like something alive. A wall of stale air rushed out to greet me, thick with dust and the smell of wood left to rot. The weak light from the hallway spilled across the room and revealed shapes that barely looked human at first glance. Broken chairs with one leg missing leaned against the wall, and boxes stacked high seemed ready to topple over with the slightest touch. My eyes scanned the clutter, trying to adjust, when I noticed a figure sitting against the far side of the room. It was only a doll, but something about it made my stomach twist. The porcelain face was cracked, its eyes wide and glassy, staring straight ahead with an expression too lifelike for comfort. Its faded dress was torn, and strands of hair stuck out in every direction as if it had been waiting in silence for years. I found myself unable to look away, because in that stillness it almost seemed as though the doll was aware of me, as though it had been waiting for someone to return. The air grew colder and a faint creak echoed across the floorboards as though the attic itself had shifted at my arrival. I tried to distract myself by opening one of the boxes nearest to me. Inside were faded photographs, toys, and folded letters tied with brittle string. My hands trembled as I untied them, the paper fragile and yellow with age. The words written inside hinted at something I could not fully understand. Stories of arguments, loss, and a child who was never spoken of again. Each letter felt heavier than the last, and with every line, a dreadful picture began to form in my mind. I placed them back with shaking hands, but the feeling lingered. The attic was not just storage. It was a graveyard of memories my family had tried to bury. Every time I returned to the attic after that first night, I felt a presence that made my skin crawl. The air seemed colder than the rest of the house, brushing against my neck and arms like invisible fingers. I could hear the faint echo of footsteps behind me, slow and deliberate, yet every time I turned, the room remained empty. It was as if the attic itself was alive, watching, waiting for me to make a mistake. Each visit left me more shaken, my heart pounding, my breath shallow. The doll always caught my attention first. No matter where I had left it, it seemed to have moved slightly when I returned. One night it was leaning on the boxes, the next it was sitting upright on a chair, its glass eyes catching the faint light and reflecting it back at me in a way that made me flinch. I told myself it was just my imagination, that maybe I had set it down differently without realizing, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. It was the kind of wrong that settled in your chest, a suffocating feeling you could not ignore. I began noticing small signs too, things that were impossible to explain. Papers that had been stacked neatly were now scattered across the floor. Dust patterns in the corners looked like tiny footprints leading toward the doll, and every time I left I felt as if a shadow was stretching out behind me, following me down the stairs, waiting for the moment I would turn my back. I started to dread even thinking about the attic, but an irresistible curiosity kept pulling me back, deeper into the darkness, where the unseen presence lingered just out of sight, always observing, always waiting. Late that night, the silence of the house was broken by a faint, heart-wrenching sound. The narrator sat frozen on their bed, ears straining as soft sobs echoed through the ceiling. It was not the creak of wood or the whistle of wind, but the unmistakable sound of a child crying. The cries were weak, desperate, and filled with pain, each one dragging the narrator closer to the truth they had been avoiding. With trembling hands and a racing heart, they picked up a candle and slowly climbed the stairs, every step heavier than the last as the sound grew clearer, pulling them toward the attic. As the attic door creaked open, the air grew unbearably cold. The flickering light revealed a sight that sent shivers crawling across their skin. There in the middle of the room was the old rocking chair swaying back and forth, and on it sat the doll, its lifeless eyes fixed forward, its head tilted slightly as though listening. The chair moved slowly, rhythmically, as if pushed by invisible hands. The crying filled the attic, yet no one was there except the doll. The narrator's chest tightened, their breath shallow as they felt the weight of something unseen pressing in from every shadow. Among the scattered boxes, the narrator noticed the old letters again. Kneeling down with shaking fingers, they pulled one free and read under the dim light. The words struck like a blade. The letter spoke of a child who had once been locked inside this attic and never returned. A life cut short, trapped in darkness, forgotten by time. The narrator's hands went cold, the letters slipping to the floor as the crying seemed to grow louder, the rocking chair moving faster. For the first time, the attic's silence was broken not by memory, but by something still alive within the shadows. I ran toward the attic door, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Every step felt like moving through a fog, slow and heavy, as if the house itself was resisting my escape. My hands shook violently as I grabbed the doorknob, desperate to pull it open. For a moment it budged and I thought I was free, but then it slammed shut with a deafening bang, sending a shockwave of terror through me. The crying grew louder, piercing and frantic, echoing off the walls and filling every corner of the attic with unbearable anguish. Footsteps began to surround me, uneven and deliberate, circling closer from every direction, yet no one was there. The rocking chair creaked violently, the doll's glass eyes glinting as though alive. I could feel the weight of unseen eyes pressing down, the air thick and suffocating. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to escape, but my legs felt frozen, trapped by the unseen force that had claimed the attic as its own. I stumbled backward, my breaths ragged, each inhale sharp and cold, every shadow seeming to twist and reach for me. And then it happened. A small cold hand shot out from the darkness, gripping my wrist with a strength that stole my breath. Panic surged through me. A scream caught in my throat as the hand tightened. I could feel the icy fingers digging into my skin, and in that moment I understood the attic was no longer just a room. It was alive, filled with the presence of that lost child, desperate to be remembered. I flailed, heart racing, but the grip did not let go. The crying reached a crescendo, surrounding me completely, and the last thing I felt before everything went black was that tiny, unyielding hand, dragging me deeper into the darkness that would never let me go.